Okay, welcome to another movie review stream. My name is Mark McPherson, film critic for movieswithmark.com, twincitiesgeek.com, and filminquiry.com. I think yeah, it's all right. So it's the 1st of December, and we are deep into award season right now, and it's going to be a busy time. So I thought I'd hop on and cover a few key films that I wanted to get to. Obviously, the big film that came out this Thanksgiving weekend, we're going to cover Moana 2, coming out from Disney. Netflix had a new film that just dropped the past few days called The Piano Lesson. So I'm going to be covering that as well. A stage play at a historical drama slash horror film. A little bit. I'll get into it a little bit more. I also wanted to cover Anora, the latest drama slash comedy from Sean Baker. Always does very lived-in films. And finally, the last little bit of extra stuff to review here, we have Dear Santa, a comedy that also came out Thanksgiving. So there's so pretty much everything has come out here, but there is a lot more. There is a lot of other stuff I want to cover in the few weeks, but there's stuff I could cover right now, but it's not closer to when it could be released. So I want to kind of hold off on that. So if you want to stay up to date on those movies for when they come out, be sure to like this video and subscribe to make sure that you're kept up to date on the latest films. All right, so I have a little bit of a different note format. I'm going to use primarily my screen here, but I'm also going to try to go back and forth here. So first up, what do we got? Let's start off with, might as well start off with the big one. One that won the weekend, so we might as well start off with that one. So much festive stuff around this time of year. Plenty. There's a lot. There's like actually within like the last week, I've started to get like a lot of the screeners. Not all of them yet, but enough where there's like a massive pile brewing. Okay. Let me get the notes up here. Okay. So here we go with Moana in 3, 2, 1. So Moana 2 is the sequel to Disney's Moana from 2016, which a lot of people loved for its great sense of adventure, its representation, and the music that you just couldn't get out of your head. So, there's a lot of pressure built up for this sequel to see, where can you go with Moana? And I mean, I don't think it's a big shocker here for anyone that the music in this one is not as catchy, but I think what's a little bit more of a shocker is that this is supposed to be like an exciting adventure film where we continue on with the familiar characters, and it doesn't have the same vibe of adventure that the first film had. It does have a lot of stuff going on. There's bigger stakes, there's more characters, there's plenty of music, and the animation looks great, and yet it never quite feels like it's all there, because it feels like so much of the aspects that made Moana so exciting have been kind of compartmentalized here, where they're not so much built as they're just kind of pushed into the film. And I think it really does damage this type of film to work, because it does have some interesting ideas here and there. Obviously, it continues on with the titular character of Moana, voiced by Ali'i Cavallo, and she's and I think she's the perfect encapsulation of the problem that this film has, is because she is so exuberant. And she approaches everything with this, I'm ready for this, I can handle anything nature, which is a great start for that character. But I think to make the adventure more endearing, you've got to have those moments where she's kind of grounded a bit, where she does lose that sense of hope for, how she can accomplish her goal, which is pretty much what happened in the first film. But the thing is, this film is so fast that it kind of like it has to zoom from bit to bit to bit, that, like I said, it doesn't really build, so we don't really have a lot of time to build up a lot of the emotions that she feels in this trip, because honestly there's just a lot of people crowding this film, because on Moana's current adventure, she's previously she restored the the heart of, like, basically she restored the environment, and now in this new film she's basically got to resurrect an island that's going to start directing traffic of other tribes so that she can explore more. So more or less what happened in the first film, but with heavier stakes, because now she's combating other gods that are much more dangerous this time around. But the problem with this film is that because it doesn't spend a lot of time developing much, like it approaches Moana more or less how we expect her to be, and that doesn't give a lot of time to grow for her crew here, because she assembles a crew of interesting individuals. So there's Loto, who is kind of the brainy builder. She's a very eccentric architect. You have Keely, who is a curmudgeonly old farmer who makes sense to bring out on for agricultural reasons. And then there's Moni, who is the ultimate Maui fanboy, so he can't wait for Maui to show up in the film, once again played by Dwayne Johnson. Much of the same character here, not much to build on him, but I'll get more to Maui in a minute. But I want to focus on the crew here, because I think there's a lot of potential for the crew, especially for Moana trying to learn lessons of leadership. But she learns them very fast in the film with a fairly decent musical number that kind of gets her crew motivated to work together and build up their skill. Which, it's a good song, but then it kind of robs the film of them still struggling to work together. There are a few moments here and there, but it kind of resolves itself too quickly. The way that I've kind of tried to describe it is that if it's like a video game where you just choose, you're an RPG and you choose the characters that make the most sense. So everything that Moana does here is calculative. She has the right people for the job, and they all play their own part in this adventure. But even though, they serve their usefulness, we don't really see much of a build for them to get to that point. It just feels like there's only one song you need, and that'll immediately get you going to the next scene. And without any room for character growth, because in the original film, there was enough time that we spent with Moana and Maui where we sensed their chemistry and their camaraderie and the hopelessness they would have when the final act arrives and they gotta start making daring moves. None of that is really present here, in the sense that there's growth, because there's a lot of familiar beats, and it does have a lot of the expected moments. Maui has another eccentric song that he sings. Moana once again approaches the idea of legacy and being true to her ancestors, and being more about exploration. Like I said, all stuff we got in the first film, and it's here in the second film, but it's just kind of there. It doesn't really reveal another side to these characters that I was hoping to see, and it just makes the crew more of a letdown, because it feels like there would be something more to explore with essentially adding more characters to the boat. And unfortunately, there's never enough time for anything in this film. Just when it feels like we're getting to know characters and something interesting is going to happen, it immediately darts to the next song or the next action sequence or the next god that they've got to confront. Even though the film presents another, there's got to be that one moment where you have Tamatoa, basically a giant monster that gets in their way, and the monster you get here is Matangi, who is I was kind of surprised how they framed this character, because she's a Hindi goddess who, according to according to Hindi legend, sorry. So according to Hindi legend, Matangi is a bit of an outcast, and it feels like that would be something interesting worth exploring. Unfortunately, the film kind of just settles for making her a bit of a bat creature who isn't so much trying to stop Moana and Maui so much as she wants to instigate them to kind of do her dirty work for her, because she's in apparently this subplot going on with a battle between the gods. And Matangi just kind of views Maui and Moana as kind of these useful characters for a subplot that is never really explored and is kind of just left on the table for a sequel, which is surprising that the film didn't have time to, with how much time it speeds through all its characters. It never once had time to develop a bigger threat of a villain who is more present as opposed to just their magic affecting the rest of this world. Now, I think depending on how much you love the animation, and depending how forgiving you are of the songs not being as great as the first Moana, but still being catchy enough where I enjoyed them anytime they were on the screen, I think most audiences will probably dig this if you're willing to temper your expectations. But I don't think that, if you're coming in here expecting to see something more explored with Moana and Maui and their culture and visiting other tribes, you don't really get that here. Like, you can feel the attempt being made here, like it's trying to build something up, but there's never a moment where you felt as completely engaged where I felt as completely engaged as the first Moana, where I was excited to see where this was going to go next and what themes it would explore. And unfortunately, Moana 2 doesn't really do that. Even the moments of humor kind of fell flat for me, because most of the gags in this film, they either involve slime and bodily, they involve slime, bodily functions, and animal noises, and a little of that went a long way. There are some funny bits here and there, but it never feels like there's a consistency to the humor. And I think that's also due in part to how it doesn't really feel like there's a growth going on within the plot where you're interested to see where the story is going, because Moana just kind of jumps into her big adventure without asking too many questions or having much downtime for consideration. Maui's character, who's also involved in like this little god subplot, is we kind of just catch up with him when he's like about like halfway through or in the middle of his own story, and it feels like all the characters here are just too busy doing everything that you expect a Moana sequel to do, that there's never a moment where you just get to enjoy them, just see their charm, just to hang out with them and just build on their character and this sense of adventure. So unfortunately, Moana 2, like, it still looks good, it still sounds good, but it just doesn't have the same vibe as before, mostly just because it feels like it's speeding through all of its adventure, that there's never a moment to appreciate any of it. So Moana 2 is currently in theaters, made over $100 million on the Thanksgiving weekend, so it's going to be there for a while. Read the chat here quick. Scorm says, hey Mark, hope your December is starting out decent. First day of December, but yeah, been pretty good. Got a lot to catch up on, but so far so good. We'll see how the rest of the year plays out. But I guess we should immediately get to the probably my favorite film that I'm going to cover today, which would be Anora. All right. By the way, everything that I am reviewing here today will be in written form on movieswithmark.com. Okay. So, here we go with Anora. In 3, 2, 1. So, Anora is the new film by Sean Baker. And I've always admired Baker's films because they have a great sense of like lived-in realism to them, where these are characters who you get to hang out with long enough that you get to understand them, their environment, who they interact with, what their struggles are like, and it just locks you in tight. So like films like Tangerine and The Florida Project did this perfectly. But I also wanted to bring up how Tangerine kind of relates to Anora, because it's more of like on a technical angle, because Tangerine was all about following some street hookers to track somebody down across the streets, and it was all filmed digitally. If I'm remembering this correctly, he filmed it all digitally with phones. Which back in the mid 2010s was a kind of a real game changer back then. But with Anora, this film is actually shot on 35 millimeter. And it kind of has like this retro feel to it where, the way that Baker depicts New York with kind of that film grain texture and the just the way that it's set up, it reminded me of films like After Hours, specifically because the film is actually kind of framed in a similar way to After Hours, basically being a more or less an adventure across the city. And the reason, and I want to stress this though, like I'm making the film sound retro. It's not. It's meant to take place in the modern day, because it involves like smartphones and all that. But just the way that you look at the film, it does have that kind of like retro quality to it with how it's filmed. So the movie is about Annie, played by Mikey Madison. And she prefers to go by Annie, even though her real name is Anora, and she's a stripper at a New York club who manages to land a perfect client because she can speak Russian fairly well. So into the club comes Ivan, played by Mark Idelston. Mark Idelston. Mark Idelston. If I'm saying that correctly, sorry. Mark Idelston. I gotta run that back because I'm screwing this up here. Hang on. Okay, so Annie speaks Russian, and this allows her to nab the perfect client of Ivan, played by Mark Eidenstein, who is just like, a young dude who wants to party, and just, the fact that, the stripper can speak Russian and is coming on to him, he's loving every minute of it. So Annie's just excited that, she's been able to please this client who's gonna pay off. And he does, because eventually he starts hiring her over for sex, and she finds out he's married to some, his parents are very, very, very wealthy. So she thinks, okay, great, I've landed a perfect client who's going to pay me thousands upon thousands of dollars just to come over and, just have sex with him. And it starts as that, it turns into, him inviting her over for parties. So his New Year's event party. And then eventually after that, they take a trip to Vegas where they have even more fun. They have plenty of sex. They get drunk, and they start forming a bond that's strong enough where Ivan tells Annie, look, I got to go back to Russia, but the only way I can stay here is if I marry an American. And so would you like to be that girl? And even though Annie is smitten enough with Ivan, she's still all about business. Everything with her is business. Like she negotiates, having like a week long sex trek with him. And when marriage comes up, she says, well, of course, how many carats are we talking on the ring here? Because she's all about business. And I think that's what makes Madison's performance here so damn good, is because she always feels like she's in control of any situation, even when things start going awry. And they go plenty awry in the second act when Ivan's family is trying to come after him and force him to annul this marriage to Annie. So a few goons come over to do this. There's Toros, Garnick, and Igor, and they've all come to basically force Ivan to annul this wedding. But Ivan takes off, and Annie's left behind. And so Annie, furious that she's been abandoned by Ivan, wants to find him just as much as these Russian goons do. But that doesn't mean she's going to strike an easy alliance. And that's because, Annie is so confident, and these like heated henchmen are just not. They're dopes. They get easily beaten up by her. They throw up in the car. They argue with people. They bitch about cell phones and how no one's connected anymore on social media. These guys are bad at their job enough that Annie just kind of rolls her eyes at them or insults them all the time. And like she's willing to go along with them on this because she's been told that, hey, if you do this, we'll still give you like $10,000. You'll get something out of it, and we get something out of it. But it always feels like Ivan's family is trying to be in control of Ivan and Annie's life, and to the point where it feels like Annie's power is being taken away, even though she's still very much in control. Because later you see that, Ivan, wasn't really being there for Annie, and that, when push came to shove, he'd just go with the divorce because that's what his parents wanted. So it feels like Annie is just losing everything here, but at the same time, she really doesn't lose that sense of urgency, and I think that's best showcased with how Annie starts interacting with Igor. Because Igor he's definitely the most sympathetic henchman, because he feels a little bit sorry that he has to like restrain Annie and, place her in the car, and that he had to like gag her at one point. He's feeling bad about this and tries to make up for it. But I love the fact that Annie never compromises. Like there are so many moments in this film where you think, okay, this is kind of going to be the moment where Annie starts seeing the sweet side of Igor. They start relating to each other, and Baker just pulls that rug out immediately and says, no, like Annie's in control. These guys are doofuses and they're making her life hell. Annie's not just going to back down on this. She's gonna spit back, and she's gonna spit acid, particularly because she uses a very, very charged slur for some of these guys, because she hates them that much, and she knows that she can bruise their egos. Like there are several scenes where it feels like Annie's going into a room, she's gonna get ganged up on by all these people, and she just eviscerates all of them. Where even on like a technical and legal level, she hasn't really won, but like on a personality and ego level, she just dominates the room. In particular, I won't spoil it, but the final confrontation that she has with Ivan's family is just rich, because she knows how to. It isn't so much that she knows how to play people; it's that she knows how to attack them. So she's very much streetwise, I guess is the best way to describe it, but she is also competent enough to just like attack, like both physically and verbally, when people start stepping up to her. And it's just amazing to watch her just have that fury on the screen the entire time. So Baker's film, and I love how it just kind of builds, because like the big chase for finding Ivan across New York City, it's an adventure that takes them to shops and nightclubs and meeting all kinds of different characters. Like I said, it's very much has like that kind of after hours vibe to it. But for the first part of the film, for like roughly about the first half, Baker films that part of the film like a whirlwind romance. Like it's edited quick. Like I said, lots of drinking, sex, and partying, and just, quick shots of all the characters having fun on New Year's and at parties and in strip clubs and all that. It's very quick. It's very fast. You would almost confuse it for being for having a happy ending with how it sets up Annie and Ivan here. But then you get to that moment where, Annie's restrained and she's trying to track down her man to get a divorce. It does have a tone very much, like I said, very much similar to like Tangerine, and it's got, shades of After Hours in there. But you're intrigued to just see where it goes, because you never know what's going to happen next. You do know eventually, yeah, they're probably going to end up fighting Ivan, but you don't expect the moments where a car might get towed, or when someone throws up in the car, or when one exchange goes awry. You're constantly invested in the film at that point. And even when they do find out, the film, I love the way the film just snowballs. How everything seems to go wrong for these henchmen trying to find Annie's man, because it keeps getting worse and worse and worse, to the point where even when they succeed, they don't really understand what they're trying to do here. Like, they don't understand annulments, despite taking it as far as they do, that they kind of have to rework everything as the film goes along. So it just keeps building up, but at the same time, it always feels like there's this constant balance of comedy and drama that is natural. That there's never a moment where like Baker's saying, okay, here's the dramatic scene where where Annie is feeling down on her luck. Here's the erotic scene where Annie and Ivan are having lots of sex, and here is the funny moment, where someone falls on their butt, or someone gets punched in the face, or someone says something very funny. All of it just has an it just has a natural flow to it. And I guess, that's kind of what I expect from Baker's films. They always present characters that feel believable in the moment, to the point where you can have those moments of overlapping dialogue and where it feels like the actors are just taking hold. Like, this is their role now. It's not what Baker has assigned them to do. It's them at that point. But I love the way, it's always something that I love about Baker's work. And I think I love it the most here is because Baker doesn't really waste time in this film. Like, it's kind of breakneck at several points. Like, oddly enough, the chase around New York is actually a bit, I found it a little bit slower than the first half, which, like I said, just, breezes by so fast and eccentric. But I love the way that that Baker just takes everything that he does best in a film and then just pumps it up. Like, he doesn't just make Annie fierce in this film. She's devouring this film whole. And I love that it doesn't just give her urgency, but it gives like a tone to this film about fighting back against like authoritarians here. That are almost established as kind of like cartoonish villains if it weren't for the fact where you realized, how much power they might actually have in reality and how likely it is that they could use it. And it's enough to make you angry, and it's perfectly personified through Annie just biting back at every chance she can. Like, there's never a moment where she kind of reveals her vulnerability. It always feels like she is fighting back, that she's on the defensive, and that she has to do it at every point. Otherwise, life is just not going to work out for her. And I feel like all of that builds up to this perfectly eerie and sad ending, where you do get to see Annie at her most vulnerable, and it still manages to surprise at that moment because, again, like, it keeps pulling the rug out from under you, right down to like the final seconds where you just see the side of Annie you didn't see before, and it's gut wrenching in that moment. Like, it punches you so hard, like out of nowhere, because you've gone throughout the film just, sharing in Annie's anxiety and terror while also embracing like the absurdity and almost kind of the gallows humor of it all. That by the time you get to the end, like, it just takes a dark turn, like, and very sharply, where it feels like that's the most perfect way you could end this film, because you've had so many great moments where you're just smirking and laughing at the screen, either at Annie's biting commentary or just like the stupidity of the henchmen trying to chase after her. But yeah, it wallops you. And I guess, again, this is something that that experienced the same with the Florida Project, is that that film did take a somewhat unexpected ending that hits you really hard, and Baker does it again here. But I think, for as much as I love his other films, like, I think Anora actually might be my favorite, just because, like I said, it takes everything that Baker does best, and it dials it up to 11, and it just feels angry and fierce and alive, and it reminds you of what, great films not only feel like, but look like. Just the way that Baker shot this film, and just the retro style and texture that he gives to this film that's supposed to be modern, and it looks magnificent, and it sounds wonderful. It has fantastic performances here, particularly from Mikey Madsen. Just like such an exceptional job here. That this is my favorite Sean Baker film, and definitely one of the best films of this year. So that was Anora. It should be playing in theaters right now. You're gonna have to look for it though, because it's gonna get it's gonna get shut out. If you think Moana 2 and what was the other one? And Wicked are the biggest films that we got this holiday season, you haven't seen nothing yet. Just wait and see what we got in the next few weeks. Let's read the chat here. Scorm says, did you see Coffin Popcorn Bucket for Nosferatu? That's something I'd use every October. Yeah, I did see that. It's odd, but I mean, that's all popcorn buckets at this point. It looks so okay. Like, it's an odd shape, but I guess all the shapes to them, to me, look that odd. But it's fine, I guess. I guess, for having a horror themed one, it's rare that you would see it for that. You'd always see it for like blockbusters. I do find that kind of exciting though. That there's merchandise for Robert Eggers' horror film for Christmas. People are getting excited about. And I might be seeing that movie very very soon here. So I will definitely be reviewing that film soon. Suck said it sounds like Anora is Sean Baker's strongest protagonist because usually his protagonists fold under pressure. I think so too, and I think it creates that much different tone because there's always that hopelessness that characters have by the end, and I think that's because Baker kind of saves up a lot of that fragility until the very very end of the film. Like I said, when there's like mere seconds left in the film, that it shocks you more than like expecting it earlier in the film. Did you ever watch Robot Dreams? I did. Actually, this time last year, I actually watched Robot Dreams. Yeah, it's a very very cute silent animated film, and yeah, I was surprised that it's a very very simple film in terms of both like its animation, its story about someone having a robot for a best friend, but it worked for me. I mean, it definitely changes how you view that Earth, Wind, and Fire song from now on. But the odd thing was like I saw the film really early when Neon sent out the screeners, but then I just had like the review waiting on my website, and it was like, okay, I'm gonna release it when it comes out so that people will be sure to see it. And it didn't end up coming out until that summer. So that review I did, I was sitting on that for like 6 months waiting for it to come out. So I know that some people have that happen with like festival stuff, but rarely do I have that happen with award season films of all things. You think you want to get it out there. I mean, it was nominated for an Academy Award, and nobody could watch it for like another 4 months, like anywhere. Yeah, it was a very, very good film. Okay, what do we got next here? We got the piano lesson. Did I say lesson? Good. I don't know why I confused with the piano teacher. I think that's because I was kind of eyeballing whether or not I wanted to buy the pianist. Not the piano. The piano. The piano on Criterion. Yeah, I don't know if I want the pianist. Considering its controversial nature, but yeah. All right, get a bit of drink of water for this one. All right, here we go with the piano lesson in 3, 2, 1. Oh, hang on. Something up there. There we go. Okay. So in 3, 2, 1. So The Piano Lesson is a new film by Malcolm Washington that's based on the play of the same name. And you can immediately tell that this was based on a play just by not just by like the way it's framed and the way that its story, is restrained to like around 1 or 2 sets. It's because it's the way that Washington directs this film with the actors in it. Because he wants to make sure that this historical drama, has a lot of like life and energy to it. And basically all the characters are dialed up to their highest level, where they're all projecting, where they're not just like acting for a film. They're acting as though they are on stage and want to make sure that everybody can hear them, and they dominate this film, which is great because you have a fantastic cast for this film, which I'll go over as I go over the story here. So like this is a film that's meant to take place in the 1930s, I believe. And it's meant to take place after like the era of slavery, but some of the old pains from slavery still exist. So in Pittsburgh, it takes place at the house of Bernice, in which her brother Boy Willie, played by John David Washington, stops by because he wants to sell an old piano that's been in the family for many, many years. He wants to sell it because he wants to own a piece of land. Unfortunately, Bernice doesn't want to sell it because she has a strong attachment to it with her family, and the reason is slowly explained throughout the film. Even though it's kind of revealed at the beginning as well, is that the piano was stolen from slave masters, and the fact that it still remains within Bernice's house is kind of a testament to the reminder of what her family was doing, and how they struggled during that time. So it's kind of a dark, traumatic artifact of the past that has just lingered around in their lives. And the thing is, this film is kind of a horror film because it does deal with the ghost of the slave master that apparently the characters keep seeing inside the house and believing it does relate to the presence of the piano there and something not being addressed from the past. But as the film gets to that point, we get to slow down and get to understand a lot of the characters. And just hang out with them, just get to know them for a bit, and again, that's how a lot of stage plays are set up here. In fact, this one has a lot of resemblance to Fences. It's framed in like a similar manner to that. But just like the way that John David Washington, he always enters the scene either excited or furious. His energy is always up, where he wants to just make a name for himself and do it quick and always assert himself so that he is perfectly in control. Whereas Bernice is just more guarded and stern and just bitter about the past, that when people start poking her about why this piano is so significant, she delivers this brutal story and is just like on like the verge of tears and just so angry that she has to keep reliving this horror that has now come into her home, that she's finding it intimidating. Just everything about like her family and her legacy and just trying to move on and trying to raise her own daughter is just, it becomes daunting. And at the same time, we get to hang out with a few other characters here. Like you have the grandfather of Doker, played by Samuel L. Jackson, who I kind of admire Jackson's performance here, because Washington is so high and he's got a lot of energy to him, and Jackson is just kind of sitting back as like this quiet voice of sincerity who occasionally chimes in now and then, but for the most part just kind of gives people these pitch perfect expressions of just like, this is what I want for my family, this is why I'm here, this is what is worth preserving. But then like the most interesting character I think I found in this film was Winnie Boy, played by Michael Potts, and I think that's just because he has some of the more interesting passages that add to the film's focus on legacy and age, because Winnie Boy brings up how just nothing thrills him anymore. Like he's really good at playing the piano, and he loves his whiskey, and he loves women, but then he gives like this whole passage about how when you get older, whiskey sucks, and you're bitter that all you can do is play the piano, and just life doesn't seem the same. And it feels like, that's kind of an expected passage, you would think, for this type of film, dealing for these strong themes of like the past still lingering and trying to tend to these wounds, rather than just let them lie dormant until they can come back in the form of a ghost that haunts them. Thematically it works, and the performance, like I said, everyone is great here. Like they're all delivering these lines like they're on stage here, and they do a fantastic job. And I do think that there's a lot of heart to the film, because while it is a lot of like bickering and debating over how to handle the future, there are some quiet and some breaks. There are some quiet moments of compassion and some breaks from it all. In particular with the preacher of Avery, played by Corey Hawkins, and he's trying to kind of be more of a presence there for Bernice, and there's some very tender moments between them where they're trying to reconcile with their own past, so that Bernice has enough strength to address like everything else that has come with her family and be more open about what happened during those slavery days rather than just try to like bury them and deny it. And thematically, I really did like how the film kind of leans into that. I do think that the film kind of loses some of that, and I know this is more of like a criticism of the play at this point, but I feel like the horror elements are just kind of treated almost too much like background noise. Like, because I get the symbolism they have here, but it always feels like the ghost of the former slavery owner is just kind of like just there to look spooky for a little bit and reinforce that fear for just a little bit before going back to like the debates and the arguments that these characters are having, which is far more interesting than whether or not the slavery master's ghost still resides within that piano and inside the house. I think once it gets more into like those supernatural elements, the film does kind of lose a little bit more of its appeal, even though it's still remaining thematically grounded at that point. I just feel like it didn't really add as much, even though I will give Washington credit for actually trying to make those scary scenes hold a little bit more terror by putting some extra effort into the lighting and the makeup and just the way that it's framed. So he does put some effort into that, where even though I wasn't digging the horror elements, there's enough faith in them to preserve that from the play. In another way, however, I almost kind of wish that that he would actually explore more of that he would actually open up more on that horror angle and kind of tie it in a little bit more intricately with like those slavery days. And I feel like a film would be like the perfect place to kind of like to show that off here, even though on its own, for just the performances, I think that Malcolm Washington has done a fantastic job, getting the best performances out of the actors here. Because I mean, Daniel Deadwyler as Bernice is just, oh, she is so damn good in this. She has so much to her character. She's interesting. She's complex. The way that she divulges her history is just brutal, and the way that she just tries to show a sweetness to her family, and and that she still has compassion and love in her heart, just it comes off so naturally by the end of the film. So while I do have some issues with the way that, because like I said, this is a bit of like a horror drama, but very, very light on the horror. There are horror elements, because like I said, it's a ghost and it does tie to the past and it is a real fear, but the horror element, I feel, is just kind of like a little bit of like a peppering for giving a little bit more thematic resonance to, for this type of story. But again, that's very much the play. There's little you can do about that unless you're willing to change a lot of it, which I have not seen the play, but I'm very much guessing that that this is fairly astute and it doesn't really go that far astray. Outside of like a few scenes, because like because you're not trapped in one setting, you can venture off to a few other locations, and we do, and it never like feels like we're getting lost in like just taking a break from from the house for a while and just going out and exploring other characters or digging deeper into the history. It always feels like there is some faith to that to the play that's being adapted here. Because the performances, like, oh my god, Daniel Deadwyler, John David Washington, Samuel L. Jackson, Michael Potts, everyone here is doing a fantastic job. And it's one of those films where the performances work so well and they only heighten the themes. And I think Malcolm Washington's film does a great job making you care about these characters, hang out with these characters, and know about all the pains that they've suffered through in the past. So The Piano Lesson is currently playing on Netflix. Oh, I should have also mentioned too the music in that film is also really good. There's a lot of sequences where characters just hang out and sing together, or there's just some music going on in a club, and just all of it is so damn good. Okay, I think I have enough time for one more film. And it's not a good one. And I think you know why. Okay, last bit of water here. Okay, now I'm out of water, so this better not lose my voice here. This might be a quick review. All right, here we go with Dear Santa in 3, 2, 1. So, Dear Santa is a Christmas comedy in which one kid writes a letter to Santa Claus, but because he can't really spell that well, he ends up writing the letter to Satan, and dark comedy ensues in which Satan himself tries to act like Santa Claus. Now, the thing, I don't think this is an entirely a bad idea for a Christmas comedy, but there has to be some willingness to not like to not wuss out on it. I think if you want to go with this material to have it like as a dark comedy of a relationship between Satan and a little kid, I think you need to have some faith in the dark comedy of that, because this film feels like one of my favorite subversive Christmas comedies is Bad Santa. And that's only just because like I love it so much, just because it's not just because it's funny and that it's crude and that it's profane and all of that, which it is, but just like it has faith enough in its comedy that it never makes the character fully redeemable. And I love I believe it was like Roger Ebert's assessment of the film, where it's basically like watching a train wreck where you love watching how many cars will fly off the rails just because the filmmakers had enough faith to keep going with this premise and get wilder with it. But Dear Santa, this film feels like it's pulling back so hard on everything else that it can do, and it just doesn't have enough faith to build on anything. So the kid is Liam, played by Robert Timothy Smith, and he's a very eccentric kid. He's a bit of a geek. He's a girl he's got a crush on. He's friends with like the less popular kids in school, and he gets bullied a lot. Underdog element, yes, all that. But Liam is also dyslexic, which is how they try to explain his letter that ends up going to Satan. And Satan here is played by Jack Black, and Jack Black shows up and basically tries to convince this kid that he can be like Santa Claus. He can grant you wishes just like Santa can, but you do have to sign a contract in which your soul becomes property of hell, and you have 3 wishes to use before that happens. So what does Liam end up doing with it? And I think this is where the film falters, because it wants you to like Liam so much. It never wants you to think that Liam is that bad of a person, because he doesn't. And you would think, okay, when he gets these wishes from Satan, if he's tired of being picked on all the time, maybe he makes like a very vindictive wish or wishes revenge. But no, Liam just keeps using them for nice things, like for his friends, or to impress a girl at school. Just stuff with the family. Just he makes all like the nice wishes that it doesn't really feel like there's a great wish fulfillment element going on here. All the really weird and cruder wishes end up being a product more of Satan more than the kid, and they're really not thought through enough where it's that funny. Like at one point, Satan grants Liam the ability to go backstage at a Post Malone concert. Now that alone would be like great wish fulfillment right there, but then he goes the extra mile by trying to convince Post Malone that that Liam is like not only a really cool kid, but also the inspiration for his music. And I know this is meant to be absurd and it's meant to be ridiculous, and that it's just kind of going to be like the same thing with like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where it's just something weird will happen and it won't fully be explained or divulged or kind of built upon. Like it's just there to be weird, but it never it never leads to anything interesting or funny with these developments. It's just kind of there for a cheap laugh and to showcase a Post Malone cameo, and then it's off to the next limp moment of comedy or drama that this film tries to amass. In particular, there's here's how much the comedy doesn't work here. At one point, Satan makes Liam's teacher poop his pants. He doesn't poop them in class. Apparently, they run into him outside when he's on a bike ride, and just, Satan says, "Oh, I'm gonna make this, snobby teacher poop his pants," and the scene goes on for, I think, roughly 2 minutes. I think maybe a little bit longer, but it goes on for an agonizing amount of time. Where I have to imagine that all the sound people on this film just exhausted all the fart sound effects they had, because there's so many farts here. And just, even if the film never finds a consistency for any of these gags either, it's just random chaos, but controlled chaos, which is weird because this film is not rated PG, it's rated PG-13, so you would think you would want to play it up a little bit more dark and raunchy and weird, but Satan is basically just Jack Black, and it's meant to be like that lovable, marketable version of Satan. So if you're expecting Tenacious D level Satan, it's not here, unfortunately. And I think the film was fairly boring, and it wasn't really that funny, and it didn't really build on any of its comedy, and the story wasn't that interesting, even on a wish fulfillment level. But then, when the film got to the third act, it felt like it just pumped the brakes on the comedy hard, as though it had to find a way to redeem Liam and make, his plight more interesting, because you really don't understand too much of the family's plight. You do get that Liam's parents are fighting, but it's all kind of played up a little bit on the absurd side, where you realize, oh, it'll probably be about, Liam trying to get his parents back together. It's only later when you learn that Liam's parents had Liam's brother died, and that's affected their marriage, and it's just kind of dumped in the third act, along with everything else, this sentimentality and this twist that reveals that Satan isn't really Satan and that he can't get Liam's soul, and it tries to vindicate Liam and give him a happy ending. And it's what is there to? Liam has been such a wonderful and perfect character throughout that there's nothing for him to learn here. There's no big lesson. It's just, his life was kind of down for a bit, and he did the best for other people, and then his brother came back from the dead, and this very schmaltzy ending that really wants to earn some last minute sincerity out of all this, and it just rings hollow. There's never a moment where you feel this built on something great, and it actually had some funny jokes to this. It just felt like it's trying too hard to be a tame Christmas comedy that you can kind of sort of watch with the kids, and it just ends up being limp. And every time it finds a moment for something comedic to explore, it goes on for too long, and it wears its welcome out quickly. Especially, there's a cameo in this film by Ben Stiller playing this role in Hell, in a scene that just lingers on. It's just you get the sensation that they're trying for improv here, even though it doesn't come off as improv, and it's struggling to find something funny here. And it's I wanted some of that bad Santa energy to just take hold in the third act. Why are you trying to make it into a schmaltzy Hallmark film? Go the full mile. Make it a ridiculously dark horror film or absurd comedy in which Jack Black accidentally murders a bunch of people. Just something, anything to give this film life, and not just feel like it was an idea for an R-rated comedy, and then it's just been smothered in all this schmaltz to get it down to a PG-13, and it just ends up being a whole lot of nothing. So yeah, Dear Santa is just is a bad Santa movie, and not the good kind of bad Santa movie. So go watch Bad Santa instead. But if you really want to watch Dear Santa, it's playing right now on Paramount Plus. So there you go. Okay. Well, we're to the end there, and I'm wearing out my voice, so let's do a quick recap of the films that I reviewed on today's stream. I reviewed Moana 2, the latest CGI sequel from Disney. It does have the same visual appeal as Moana. It has okay songs, it has a lukewarm adventure, and it doesn't really have much time to build up its characters, even though we know who they are. I just wanted a little bit more than just Moana's eccentricities and Maui's sly jokes. I also reviewed The Piano Lesson, a drama based on a play directed by Malcolm Washington. Had some fantastic performances by Daniel Deadwyler and John David Washington in some fantastic roles of a family trying to deal with the grief and trauma of the slavery era in 1930s Pittsburgh. I also reviewed Anora, the best film from Sean Baker and easily one of my favorite films this year, about a hooker who marries a rich Russian young dude and has to end up getting their marriage annulled in one wild night of trying to find a missing guy. It has a lot of energy, a lot of realism, and just a beautiful way that it shoots New York City with 35mm film. It's definitely one of the best films of the year. Do not miss it. And finally, we reviewed Dear Santa, a film that wants to be about a kid getting Satan for Christmas instead of Santa Claus, and it never really finds anything funny to do, possibly because the film doesn't have any faith in itself. Needs a little bit of that Hail Satan energy. Just something. Anything. Just give me more than just like the Christmas fluff. And I know that streaming services can do it. I have seen some good Christmas films that they've did. Last year, I was mildly surprised by Candy Cane Lane and Very Merry Batman. They're not good films, but they're endearing enough where I had a good time with them, which is rare. So if you would like to read reviews of all the films I reviewed on today's stream, you can go to movieswithmark.com and read them there. And if you want to stay up to date on the latest movies, and there's a lot we got coming up this month, be sure to like and subscribe. So what can you look forward to? If you like and subscribe, well, coming up in about the next week or so, I will be reviewing Queer, the latest film from Luca Guadagnino, as well as Nosferatu, the latest film from Robert Eggers. And there is a lot of other films coming down the line that I've got to review. In terms of some A24 films coming up, I've got a whole bunch of Neon films to cover, and also some Netflix films as well. And in fact, I think possibly soon I might be reviewing the Wallace and Gromit film early. So yeah, there's a lot of films coming out this holiday season, and I will be getting to them all because the year is coming to a close here. We only got 1 month until the end of the year, and I got to assemble my top 10 list of movies. And there are some that I know that are going to be up there immediately, but filling out the rest of the list is going to be a challenge, and I need to make sure that I see everything. So if you want to stay on track with everything that I'm reviewing, be sure to like and subscribe and all that. So, yep, I'll be back in about a week or so to review Nosferatu and what else? Queer, and who knows, a surprise film. There'll be more. I have plenty to review, plenty to talk about. Don't you worry about that. So, all right, see you next time.